Namaskar. One of the important teachings of Ananda Marga is the importance of surrender. And the idea is that on this incredibly difficult journey of the journey to enlightenment and self-realization, it doesn't matter how strong or smart you are or how much effort you make, somehow our tiny human capacity will never be quite enough to overcome all the obstacles that the universe puts in front of us. So, if one can get out of the way a little bit and make space for the divine to come in and use the inexhaustible power of the infinite to help us on our journey, then things get accomplished a little more easily. So, on the spiritual journey, a bit of humility and surrender and leaving space for a greater power to express itself through us and to help us on our journey is one of the really smart things to be able to learn to do. But how do we learn to do it? Well, I heard something really amazing the other day when I was listening to a discourse of our master, Sri Ananda Murti. And he was talking about the tantric dialogues, the tantric scriptures, which are conversations between Shiva and his consort, or his wife, Parvati. So on behalf of all the people, Parvati acted as a representative for the common people and asked questions on their behalf which would help them. Of course, she already knew the answer, but she asked these questions for the benefit of others. So one of the questions she asked was, there are these, you say that, Shiva, you say that the only way to get self-realization is to practice, to do spiritual practice. But what about people who can't do spiritual practice? Some people can and some people can't. What can they do? How can they make spiritual progress? And Shiva didn't want to compromise. He just said, everybody has to do spiritual practice. But Parvati knew very well that there were some lovely, simple people who were just not at that stage yet. And so she wanted to stand up for them. And she says, no, what about there's people who can't do spiritual practice? It's a fact. What can they do? And again, Shiva insisted everybody has to do meditation, everybody has to do spiritual practice, but Parvati would not give up. And finally, grudgingly, Shiva said, well, even if people can't do, those people who can't do spiritual practice, if they completely surrender to me, I will do their meditation for them. Wow. Imagine that. So, all of us, or most of us here, are making an attempt at meditation. We're doing meditation. We have the desire. But that's amazing to know that if one can, even if we do meditation, yet if we do surrender completely, the divine can do our meditation for us. And I remember one phrase that our master said one time. He said, your job is just to sit there. The rest is my responsibility. So, how to get more surrender? I think realizing that priority, how important it is one of the first things. I need to get some surrender. But, and if it is we tend to get the things that we prioritize, right? So if we prioritize surrender, you'll find that somehow things will start happening and it will start to come to you. But something came to me the other day, and I was listening to an old story which I have heard many times, but I didn't make a certain connection about it. So the story is about Draupadi, the wife of the Pandava, brothers. So she had 5 husbands, and her 5 husbands were engaged in the war, the great Mahabharata war. So the great showdown between the forces of good and the forces of evil. And Duryodhana, the leader of the forces of evil, knew that he couldn't defeat the Pandavas in a legitimate fight. And he knew that Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, had a weakness for gambling. So he was he was a great warrior, he was a great king, and he was a great person and a great sadhaka, a spiritual practitioner. But he had this weakness. And don't we all have some weakness? So knowing this weakness, Duryodhana challenged him to a gambling match and brought with him loaded dice. And Yudhishthira, even though he, kind of had some intuition that things wouldn't go so well, he simply could not resist. So the gambling match started, and Yudhishthira just kept losing. And he gambled away he gambled away the freedom of himself and his brothers, and he gambled away his kingdom, and finally there was nothing else to gamble. And the only thing that he had left was his wife, Draupadi. So he gambled her too. He bet her also, and he lost. And then Duryodhana and the forces of all the warriors who were fighting with him went to get Draupadi, and they brought her before the assembly of warriors, and everyone was laughing and making fun of Yudhishthira and Draupadi, who had been gambled away and was now the possession of Duryodhana, and they wanted to humiliate her in front of everyone. So one of the warriors grabbed her sari and began to pull it off her, and there was nothing that she could do, and she was desperately trying to hold on to her sari. And Krishna, her divine, the divine beloved Krishna, who was helping on the side of the good forces, he was there also, as were all the warriors. And she looked at him and she called to him and asked his help. And she was sort of reaching out with one hand and with the other hand holding her sari and saying, "Krishna, help me." But he was ignoring her. He was looking the other way. And then finally, when the moment came when she would be stripped naked in front of everybody, she realized that there was nothing left that she could do. So in her desperation, she let go of her sari and looked at Krishna and put both hands up in the air and surrendered completely. And at that moment, a miracle happened, and the warrior who was pulling her sari found that however much he pulled the sari, it kept on coming, and more sari was coming, and Parvati's prestige was saved, and everyone saw the miracle happen. So it was not until, as long as Draupadi was holding the sari with one hand, Krishna was not coming to her aid because she was still trying to help herself and not surrendering completely. But the moment she put up both hands and gave up her own efforts and depended entirely on him, in that moment he came and helped her. And the connection that, after so many years of hearing that beautiful story, came in my mind the other day was the connection with Kiirtan. So many of you know that we do not only sitting meditation, but we do a beautiful devotional dance where we sing the mantra, Baba Nam Kevalam, to different melodies. And we dance an ancient dance, which is purely a dynamic form of meditation, a devotional dance. So in that dance, what do? We move with the music in rhythm from side to side, and we raise both hands, which is a symbol of surrender. And suddenly, I don't know why I didn't make that connection before, I remembered that story, how Parvati raised both hands. And remembering that story and its meaning of, or its teaching about surrender, suddenly I made the connection with my own hands. And I got that feeling of complete surrender, let go, and there's nothing that I can do, and I depend entirely on the divine. So letting myself depend entirely on the divine and expressing that as I raise my hands and remembering that story and trying to capture that feeling in my own kirtan. And it was beautiful. It really gave me a deeper experience of kirtan, and it added so much to my enjoyment. I really enjoy it anyway, but it just added another deep and powerful layer to my experience of kirtan. So that's what I wanted to share to you. Think about that story. Try thinking about it when you're doing kirtan. Try thinking about it when you raise your hands while you're doing the dance, and see if it doesn't bring another deeper and beautiful element to your kirtan. Thank you very much. Namaskar. Have a good week.